Hi guys, just doing a quick flick through of Rifle Squad, the British Home Guard, and this is the, I guess not really sequel, I suppose next in the series of Rifle Squad US at Omaha Beach. So I wanted to keep the system more or less the same. It's a system that personally I really like, so I wanted to use it again. I probably will keep using it, to be honest, in other settings. So I appreciate straight away, for example, that, you know, British rifle squads are generally referred to as rifle sections, but, you know, bear with me on that one, I hope, because I wanted to make it clear that this was the same system as the previous game. So, you know, there are reasons for that. So here's the book, that's the cover. As ever, it won't have that line across on your copy. That's this is my proof copy. It's similar thickness, not quite as thick as US at Omaha, but you'll see the layout. I'm sure a lot of this will look quite familiar, especially if you've had a look at that particular game, but also any of my games. Generally, you know, the rules are set out nice and clearly with lots of diagrams and examples and things through there. You can see I'm using the new software package throughout this game, examples and all, as well as the maps at the back here. Okay, there are 9 scenarios in this one to do. And this is, as I say, the British Home Guard. So this is slightly different to US at Omaha in that you are generally defending the shores of Britain against a imagined German invasion in World War II. It's not strictly Operation Sea Lion as such, which is the sort of fabled plan of the Germans to invade Britain fairly early in the war. This is set slightly later in the war when the Home Guard were better armed, so they're using proper weapons rather than sort of tools and other such things that they were armed with earlier in the war. So you've got some decent weapons to use. Other than that, I'd say the system of play is very similar to US at Omaha. There are some significant changes, but I'd say generally the system is similar. Your squad, for example, here consists of 10 soldiers rather than 12, and you just have 3 leaders rather than 4. So it's slightly smaller squad, fewer leaders. I guess your turn goes a little quicker, but you tend to get a few more orders, particularly on the corporal, who has the option to re-roll, for example. So he gets more than perhaps the Lance Corporal in yellow here, it is this time, he gets the re-roll, so tends to get a few more orders than the corporals did at in US at Omaha. You've then got a corporal here in orange, who's basically equivalent of the sergeant in Omaha, so he rolls 2 dice and takes the best. And you've got Sergeant Hull there, who's the equivalent of the staff sergeant in the US game, and in that he rolls 3 dice. Bit of background information about them there as well. You'll notice perhaps here that there are no scouts on this one, because we're generally defending, then we're not sort of needing to scout the German positions, and the Germans will arrive and attack you. So this is more of a defensive game. So the scout ability is gone, as has the spotting ability. The Germans generally not going to hide. They're going to be sort of, you know, charging down the beach at you or through inland scenarios and so on. You still have a medic. You see here, you've got an engineer in Private Don who can lay mines, which is quite useful. Quite a fun aspect of the game. You've still got your bar team, which works in the same way as it did before. You now have a sniper in Private Hope, so he's quite a powerful unit, works on his own generally, so can't use the combined fire tactic. For example, you now have a submachine gun. In fact, you've got a couple of submachine guns, because Corporal Smith has a submachine gun as well. So you've got a couple of submachine guns that are working the same way as the German SMGs. So you roll 3 dice for those. They can join in with combined fire. So we've now got rifles, SMGs, and the bar, which can combine together. So there's some interesting tactical options with those. Other than that, generally the the section, the squad looks pretty much the same as it did before, with those, I guess, significant changes. Line of sight works in the same way. The German forces are generally the same, but they do have air support. So you see there's a Messerschmitt token here, which is important in the game. And then we just run through the rules, as I say, in the normal way. There are changes, for example, in how the Germans arrive. For a start, the Germans go first in this game, so being the attackers. And there's generally a number of units, or a number of units that appear each turn, rather than you sort of having to find them as you did in the first game. So they will arrive, and they arrive according to the turn tracker. The general idea is they start at the top of the particular map. So if you look, sort of quick look at this particular inland map, for example, the Germans generally appear at the top of the column. You notice there are 6 columns on this game, so it's a slightly larger map. It's a little bit longer as well in this aspect, so there are more hexes on the map. So there are 6 columns. The Germans appear here, and they generally sort of fight their way down, depending on what sort of units they are. They move in different ways and interact with the terrain and so on in different ways. And the British will generally be down here. They start on these green circles, and you see that sometimes they are placed a little further forward, which again is a quite interesting tactical setup as to whether, or to what extent, you're going to put guys on there. You'll have to put some. If you've got a full squad of 10, there are always 4 starting hexes. So obviously 10 divided by 4 is more than 3. Remember, the 3 is the hex maximum, or stacking limit if you prefer. So you'll always have to put somebody up here, and obviously you wouldn't want to stick a guy up there on his own who's not a leader, because he won't be able to do anything until he gets orders. So there's always a bit of an issue about whether you put a leader up here or a little group of guys with him or whatever, because they can sometimes come under quite heavy fire early on, so it's quite important. But they can also do useful things, of course, when they're up there, like sort of stem the early tide, or perhaps plant mines or whatever else it might be. The objectives, I guess, are slightly more varied in here than they were at Omaha. So there are 1 or 2. Generally, you're defending the territory and you're trying to keep the Germans away. So you've got coastal arrival scenarios, as they're called. So you're, for example, here trying to stop the Germans getting below this red dotted line, for example, here. But there is a scenario where you have to lay mines on certain hexes, and there's a scenario where you have to kill the senior German officer as well. So there is a few different things to think about on some of the scenarios. Other than that, I think it plays out pretty much the same. The AI is obviously different. It's more aggressive, German AI, so they'll be coming at you more than they did before. So a little bit, there'll generally be more German units on the map as well. So I guess the German phase is a little bit more involved than it was on the Omaha game. I guess you've got, on each map there's an AA gun, you see here, and a sort of anti-aircraft gun down here and here. And if you've got that manned and a Messerschmitt appears, then you can potentially shoot that down, which is quite good fun. Okay, so that's the game. It's available in the usual places, or will be fairly soon, I hope. So on Amazon and Wargame Vault, if it's not already, but it will be very soon. And the counters come with it, of course, in the usual way, on the final page there. But it's an interesting point just on counters. I've made up a set here because I'm going to record the instructional playthrough shortly, and I've just made those up. What I've done, you probably can't really get a feel for that, but what I did with these, I always print them onto A4 sticky labels. Let me just try and grab one here if I can, which is this. So this is a label. It's actually got, you can peel that off the bottom there, you see, and that whole thing is just one big sheet of label. So I tend to, what I do is download the counters, or obviously get the counters off my computer, but you can download them at Board Game Geek, if they're already on there, on the files section for the game. And I print them straight out onto this label, which is just only paper, fits perfectly in the print in a standard printer. Just make sure I get the orientation right, so the counter's going to the right side of the paper, of course. And then I just peel that off and stick that straight onto card of, you know, a couple of millimeters or so in thickness. What I did this time, and I've got videos on the channel showing sort of how to do that. What I've done this time is after I stuck the label on the card, I just got a thin paintbrush and just painted over the whole lot with a layer of PVA, just standard PVA glue, which usually comes as a sort of white glue, but it dries crystal clear, as you can see. So I just put a cover on there, and what I'm hoping that will do is just stop these counters from losing their clarity a little bit. You know, when I've played quite a few games of this using the same set of counters, I find that the printer ink tends to rub off gradually or fade slightly on, you know, on the label. I don't know whether that's just the quality of my printer, which is not the best printer, or whether it's because they're printed onto a sticky label, or, you know, or whether it's just general wear and tear of me sliding them around and so on. But I'm hoping that layer of PVA glue, which hasn't really, I mean, it may have given them a very slight sheen, but not much. Nothing I can really tell. It's certainly not dazzling me in the light or anything. But I'm hoping that it just feel a little bit more plasticized kind of thing. It just feels like that should stop any of the ink from coming off those. So I just thought that might be an interesting little side note. But there's the game, Rifle Squad, British Home Guard, and I hope, particularly if you've enjoyed the Omaha game, or just fancy something a bit different to, you know, the normal sort of World War II games, that might be a good one for you. Thanks, folks.